Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Alexandra Greenberg, and this is Insight into Wellness. Today, I'm talking with Nicole Kleemann, and she is a creative leadership coach. Nicole and I are going to be discussing the wisdom of saying no. Nicole works with women who are ready to make significant change to go after what they truly want in their life and career. She blends coaching with her international leadership experience at Google in customer service, sales, and advertising. Nicole's work is founded on the principle that we all have the wisdom and power in us to achieve what we truly want in life, and nothing makes her happier than seeing women empowered to transform their lives and careers to be more meaningful and fulfilling. Nicole, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. That was lovely.
Yeah.
I've never heard it that way.
So, I usually call you Nick. Is that fine for
Nick
today?
is fine. Nick, Nicole, whatever you like.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to thank you so much for joining me on this conversation. I'm really excited to dig into the wisdom of saying no. And it's something that I work on with my clients, maybe not with this language, but it's so important.
Yes.
And one thing that I love about this interview series is really highlighting you and the healer.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to just start the conversation by learning, where did your journey start with holistic healing? And just a reminder to everyone, what I think of holistic healing is really lifestyle approach, not just seeing the doctor when we need to, but really taking and adhering to a lifestyle pattern that is healing for us. So where did your journey start?
It actually started pretty dramatically, I have to say.
Oh, great.
Because I'm this kind of person that overdoes things from time to time. And I definitely did overwork. So I had a burnout, including depression, anxiety, that then even led to, but that then included later on even a herniated disc. So I was rendered motionless and speechless in a way. So it hit me on all fronts. That's how I received the full-blown message that I need to change. And one thing, luckily, probably because the way it all happened, what became very, very clear to me very quickly was there is not just one way. So I had a conversation with my friends over lunch, and I said, I think I need to have this 3-week silent meditation retreat. I need to get out of here, whatever. And they looked at me knowing she's not going to a 3-week meditation retreat silently. That's not happening. But they said, Nicole, maybe have you considered seeing a doctor and maybe find a medical leave or something, right? Because they clearly saw more than I did. They saw that I was exhausted. I saw the doctor and luckily got the diagnosis of you have a depression and anxiety. And that's the symptoms of a burnout, right? And I said, oh, what's great, which means not great, I have a depression, but great, now I have a solution. Right? And I remember the first thing I said to him was, I would like to have a bit of time off. I would like to have a therapist, but I do not want to have medication because I do know, in my case, I knew the trigger. I knew what happened in order to get me there. So, and I said, I don't want to have.
By the way, that you knew. In him.
Yeah, I'm this type of person that has a very strong conviction that I know. That's not always true, but I still believe it. So, but I do not believe in pills for feeling bad or something, right? So, the first approach is not trying to find medication. I had a sense that talking to somebody would be more beneficial. And I already had a coach, so I knew that talking helps, right? And with that in mind, I luckily found a beautiful therapist that I could talk to. I found an incredible doctor. And when then the herniated disc came on top of it, I already had a great chiropractor. And immediately, because of this setup, I knew that I had literally head, body, and soul covered in a way, right? And that was super important to me because all of these things are related. my body giving out was a very clear sign is you need to slow down, right? And that's kind of how I started connecting the dots. And then books like The Body Keeps the Score and what is the other one that The Body Says No. And there are other kind of, Bessel van der Kolk, Dr. Gabor Mate, all these people talk about the connection between body and mind. And then there are slightly newer ones that talk even put the emotion back in as well. And these are all connected. And that's what I experience and what I truly believe in. And that's actually also what I do with all my clients when we start working, right? There's, in my eyes, no way around trying to at least balance these three things in one way or the other, or get them more aligned than they have been before.
Yeah, it's very often that we will, go just to a therapist or seek medication or seek one specific thing. But in fact, when you work with the whole, that's when you can really start to see change.
Yeah. Yeah. And at the end of the day, I truly believe that this, not just helped me mentally and emotionally, but it also prevented surgery for me, right? I do believe that the care that I got, because when you have people literally supporting you, that is also emotional care, right? Because you have somebody who's attentive to you, you have somebody that you can talk to, and both sides, right? So my physical and my therapist, they were totally in agreement. So I shared with them both sides, right? And they were totally in agreement that they belong to each other, and supported that. And that was beautiful to find. And I think really, really lucky for me.
Yeah. I'm so happy that you found those. So as you started to heal and work towards health, you found yourself working towards your own business as well, which is, I share that. I think a lot of coaches, we heal ourselves and then find how amazing that it can be and how it can feel, and then we help others. When did that start to transition for you and go towards, this power and this wisdom of saying?
That actually, in a way, started much earlier, because I always, the role that I had within Google was, for me, the juiciest part was what we call people management. And people management could be pure performance management and nothing else. But for me, it never was. For me, it was always coaching. When I had the opportunity to work with somebody in a deeper sense, then that was where I absolutely loved working. So I started coaching already in Google. But when I then got sick, Google, although I didn't really say it that way at the beginning, I said, okay, let's go to a coaching school. I want to have an education to really manifest and really learn what I'm currently more instinctively do, and with all the leadership and management and whatever training I had, what I do, but I need some more methodology or something in there. And that plan was already done. And then it took another year literally to quit and then say, and finally I set up my very own business. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. Well, when did this start to become really, because why I invited you here is really to get into this juicy bit of the wisdom of saying no and the ability to say no. So when did that become the direction?
Let's say it became the direction. I actually, it has a really interesting start. But now that I think of it, I've never thought that there is a particular start, but there is a particular start, which I have in my talk. When I talk about it, it's the story I tell first. I realized suddenly that what led, the kind of trigger that I had for all the rest, in a way, was a situation with a manager who never asked a question. I always would have said, I'm really good at saying no. I know what I want. I'm a very strong, determined person. I'm considered sometimes even intimidating, right? Not that I understand that, but that's fine. But so my word always counted, and I knew that. And so if you would have told me you suck at saying no, I would have said, that's impossible, right? I always know how to say no. I know what I want. But I realized suddenly that I haven't been asked a question. And I realized something else is the way I ended up with, let's say, 20 things on my plate that didn't belong there was the phrasing of how it was brought to me. And it was something along the lines of, Nicole, you're really good at that. I really want you to do that. So I got the ego stroke. And the second one was, I really want you to do that, something I couldn't say no to because I'm a very loyal and supporting person. So there was no question for me. No choice, apparently. And the other ways were very similar. It was always an ego stroke first, and then something that kind of touched more on habitual behavior. And then it's also a cultural thing. When in the US, for example, a manager can say in the opposite way, he can say, I strongly suggest you do that. For me, that is a suggestion. And if I don't agree with that suggestion, I don't hear that I have to do that. So it goes both ways, right? So it's so what I started to do is I looked into the reasons why it is actually difficult to say no, right? And some is the language that is used, some is the habits and expectation we have and we perceive that are set up for us. Some is our values. So for example, I have a strong value around loyalty. I have a strong value around responsibility, right? I feel responsible for more or less everything. If I have to be or not, I just feel it. And then I also have some inner critics, right? I have some certain things, the way I grew up and certain things that I get easily triggered by and habitually get into a situation where I don't say yes or no. It just, because I don't say anything, I suddenly end up in the situation, right? When you don't hear the question, you're likely not saying anything, but therefore you end up with having something on your plate. That can be, as we are in this time of the year, it can be the expectation of your family that you are preparing the Christmas dinner because you have done that for the last 10 years. So even if you don't want to, and even if there are 10 different alternatives around, right? And then it has to be a certain meal. It has to be at a certain time. It has to be at a certain place. And we never question that because it's so habitual. It's so in our community, in our culture. It's the role we always have fulfilled. And when we want to change, and that's the big thing, right? And I think that's when I started to really think about saying no. The big thing is when we want to change, we have to start saying no to things. And the most difficult pieces we say no to is these unwritten rules, these things that we have done all the time, the things that we are known for, the things that give us security, the things that give us a role, the things that give us purpose sometimes even, right? But in order to change, we need to rock the boat a bit, and the people around us do not like that.
Well, I've always heard throughout my life, no one really likes change.
Yeah.
I don't think that's fully true, but change, even when you see it in children, change is very hard sometimes. And you hit on some really juicy pieces. One of them is our values.
Yeah.
And I talk about values a lot with my clients because when you solidify your true values, it's easier to go down the list and say, does this hit one of my values? Is this deeply seated in who I am and who I want to be? And so turning inward and really focusing in on those values is so important.
Yeah.
And also I call them non-negotiables. So making really harsh, sometimes radical, one might say, decisions like I'm not going to cook Christmas dinner this year, and making that decision and sitting with that decision. So when we talk about values as a part of this journey, is that something that you work with your clients? How do you step into working with your clients around making these really important?
First and foremost, we have a conversation so that they understand they do have values, even if they've never thought about them, right? And the very easiest thing, and everybody can do this because there are plenty of values lists on the internet. You can download a list, go through the list and say, just intuitively, what are the words, and tick all the words, right, that seem to be important to you or speak to you in any way. And then you get smaller and smaller and say, this is kind of the deal breakers, as you said earlier, right? One thing that I then sometimes add, because as I said, responsibility is not a value of mine, but responsibility is actually something that I am, right? I feel very responsible for many, many things, but loyalty is a value of mine. So they are very kind of related sometimes. And one thing that I want to say to that is values inform decision making, but values also can inform you about some of your blind spots, right? So if somebody, because people can play with your values as well, right? And I don't say this person did this intentionally, right? I absolutely do not want to say that. But what happens there when he said something along the lines of, Nicole, you're always so good with, let's say, difficult team members, right? You kind of get them to be better integrated or perform better or whatever. Then he spoke to a value of mine. He spoke to a value of me being responsible, me being caring. So, but at the same time, it was used against me when I already had 5 of these people, right? So you need to know these values in order to determine, because behind the values is a level of need. And I always talk about the 3 basic needs that human beings have: safety and security, love, belonging, and relationship. And the last one is individuality and authenticity, right? So these are kind of the cornerstones. I always put them in a triangle. These are the cornerstones that we have. And sometimes our value, let's say, use loyalty and relationship work very well, right? But loyalty and individuality sometimes don't.
Yeah.
And that's what you need to understand, that's why I kind of go further. I talk about values, and I look at values, and I look at where do they support you and where do they sometimes, I would say, let's say, hold you back in a way, and or limit you, or put you in a corner that you really do not want to be in. And your body actually knows, because your body reacts immediately to that. The no that you do not say, your body feels. You get tense. We all know this churning in our stomach. We all know the tension in our shoulders. We all know these things. And when I ask in my talk, for example, tell me how that feels when you haven't said no to this thing. And every single person immediately can tell me, oh yeah, I feel this kind of knot in my stomach. I feel this tension. I get very hot. I get out of breath. All these things, right? They are all physical symptoms. Every single person has. And that's a very good indicator then when I talk to them, say, listen to that. You might not immediately therefore say no, but you already know that something is not working with your value system or your needs.
So when you start working with your clients, you talk about values, you really get into the physical aspect, and there it is again, we're talking mind, we're talking body. We can't get away from it. It's amazing. Yeah. You hit on something that was really important to me when you were speaking a little bit earlier in the conversation, and you said that people may find you intimidating. I think a huge part of why we tend not to say no is we don't want to feel like we're overpowering someone, or we want to be nice, like this word nice.
This word nice, yeah.
Intimidating is in the eye of the beholder. We are standing up for ourselves. Give me a sense of how you speak to your clients, and how you just speak in general about the sense of awareness and like fulfillment that you can get. And although some may think it's intimidating and some may not appreciate that, it is beautiful.
I actually, how do I speak about this? So intimidating, and that's an interesting word, right? And I maybe put this even on purpose here. It's a feedback I got, right? So it's something I've heard somebody telling you sometimes are intimidating. And it shocked me, because that's not my intention. or at least not with these people that I really care about. But it is a descriptor of the role I took on. Right. So when I was the manager and I was really a big proponent of this, when I had to support my team members, I had to be a very strong, determined person. And I am a very strong and determined person. And sometimes that means I have to intimidate somebody because otherwise they are not listening, or at least they feel like that, right? And that's fine by me. But I think there is a way of getting to know yourself and getting to know your values, getting to know your needs, getting to listen literally to head, body, and heart. And that was really difficult for me to kind of be, because being emotional has a very bad connotation for me.
Yes.
Right? We all have heard that, oh, you're so emotional. You can't be that emotional, particularly in the office. But we can't cut that off. I get angry. I get disappointed. I get sad, right? I have all these things. And in the past, and that's what led to burnout, literally. In the past, I cut them down. I didn't show them. I didn't live them. I didn't try to feel them, which is slightly impossible. You feel them, but you do not pay attention. And so what I work with all my clients on, in a way, not to the extreme all the time, but in a way, is to accept that we have emotion, that there is different ways of showing them. Yes, you can't kind of have an absolute meltdown in front of 20 people when you have when you're leading the meeting, right? But there is a way, and that's the same with saying no and everything else. There is a way of being with this and I always call this taking a pause. Take a deep breath. The most important thing that you have, and the easiest tool you have accessible all the time, is taking that deep breath, right? And that's how I very often start. And my goal is to have a woman, in my case, as I work mainly with women, have an understanding of using all her wisdom. That's why I call it wisdom of saying no. All her wisdom, because she has every single thing in herself. She has an emotional capability. She has a bodily sensation, and she has a pretty smart brain, right? So use all three and bring it up and bring it together and align it so that you are very capable in every situation to react appropriately without denying yourself anything, in a way. Right? And sometimes that means leaving the room.
Of course, use everything that you can.
Yeah.
So when we talk about the wisdom of saying no, why do you think that people aren't saying no more often? What's holding us back from speaking our truth?
Fear. So, we touched upon a few things earlier. There is this, the inner critics that we have. There are habitual things. There are experiences that we had. There are many, many of these things. But there's one thing that I also try to explain, and I try to make it very short now. When we get a request, right, it's like a trigger to our body, first and foremost to our core emotion. And there are 7 core emotions that we have. And like anger, fear, sadness, joy, excitement, and I forgot the 7th. But there are these core emotions that they are immediately triggered, and these core emotions, when they are triggered, they create first and foremost the bodily sensation. That's what I said earlier, right? And our brain in that moment, because it's kind of very similar to the fight and flight and freeze mechanism, is not our best advice right now, because it's telling us an old story. And that's what happens when we have trouble saying no, we suddenly get the story, oh, if I say no, they don't like me anymore. If I say no, they think I'm not capable. If I say no, I might not get the promotion. If I say no, I might not have the next project. So there's a lot of that in there. And there's this, what we said earlier, this, I have to be nice, I have to be polite, I have to be everybody pleaser. Women have an imposter syndrome very often. Women have the need for perfectionism more often, I think, than some men, at least some men. So we see all these things, and that's why it is really, really hard to understanding. So in my opinion, understanding always helps to know what happens there. And then from there, paying attention, and that's the breathing moment, paying attention. Do I want to say yes to this, or do I want to say no to this, right? What is really going on? And if I want to say no, but can't in this moment because I'm still in this fight, flight, freeze moment, whatever that is for you, then the thing is, take a deep breath, look at the person and say, great idea, can we talk about it tomorrow? And leave. Right? You need the most important need at this time is literally time to calm your nervous system down, because otherwise it's telling you the wrong story. It's telling you an old story. And you want to make sure that you are not saying yes because you just are afraid of not having a promotion or not being nice. When in reality, and that's another thing that you can check when you do the talk, and I've seen it, when you start saying no to certain things with an informed decision, with very good arguments, nobody, and I guarantee you, nobody will start fighting that no. Because you have time to prepare for this. Mm-hmm. Whereas when you are in the moment and habitually say yes or nothing, you're not prepared. There's no time for preparation. You just react. And what you want to do is you want to act instead the next day.
And something that I've really had a strong personality my entire life. And one thing that I was told when I was pretty young was it's never too late to go back and say what needs to be said. Now, this might be a little bit different in the workplace if you've told your boss that you'll work through something. But when it comes to your friends, your family, and yourself, it's never too late to say, you know what, when I said that, I wasn't thinking correctly. When I said yes, I really did mean no, or whatever it is that you're trying to communicate, it's never too late.
I love that. And it's actually true for the job as well, because here's what happens when you do not say no. And that's what I talk as well about. There's a cost of not saying no. And the cost is really, really high when you really think about it. Because when you end up with 20 things on your plate that do not belong there and you're overwhelmed and overworked, you end up having some things slip. And you hope that nobody sees them, that nobody knows and recognizes that you are not doing them right. But reality is they do. Right? They might not say anything because it's maybe not that important for them. But what they start to not trust you anymore. They start to not think you are reliable anymore. They see that these things slip. They see that you are not communicating properly. That's what you might hear in a performance review afterwards. Your communication skills suck is what you get. You don't get, you let that slip or you don't do this. But you get this, you should have told me earlier. That's what you get a lot, actually. Or why didn't you talk to me? You saw this coming. Why didn't you kind of do your communication thing, right? That's what true leadership is about. Communicate early. So it is actually much easier to say no in the first place and not have this kind of repercussion afterwards. The other thing that happens very often to, I think probably everybody, is that we say yes to something and we want to, because excitement is also a core emotion. We want this thing. It's shiny, it's beautiful, it's great. And then we realize, oh gosh, this is way more work than I thought. And I have the most beautiful example because I talked to a director at Google and she told me she had this beautiful shiny project on top of her regular work and she wanted to do this. And and she thought I could do the project by dialing into my team in Southeast Asia, which is a very different time zone than here, California. She would do this once a week, one night a week, right? And would kind of get everything done then, and that would be fine. 9 months later, it was Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. And her kids were saying, oh, mommy, are you going back to work? When she had put them back into bed at 8. Her kind of relaxing time, her exercise time, her time with her hubby, her time with her family, all this kind of went down the drain, right? And that's when she realized, wait a moment. And what she did, and I think this is brilliant, she went back and said, what was the scope of the project when I signed? Not what it is now, but what did we agree to at the very beginning? And at the very beginning, the project was set up to be maybe a certain time period, but definitely me only being there and available and working on this one night a week. And now it's 5. So what she then did is she created a plan and she created a proposal, went back to her managers and said, this is what I think we need to do. And they all said yes, because at the end, and that's an ego thing, we have to understand. At the end, they do not care if she is doing the job. They care that the job is done. It's hard to hear and it's hard to kind of take in because that hurts. But that's what everybody cares about. Everybody was so involved and bought into this project. Everybody wanted to have it finalized. It doesn't matter sometimes who is really doing it. And that brings us sometimes back to the Christmas meal, right? Everybody wants it on the table, but who's doing it?
Yeah.
Right?
And that, we take that on. And so having her, the ability that she had to go back and redefine what it was and build in some non-negotiables for herself.
But guess what her answers were? And she is somebody that I recognize as somebody who's usually very, very good at setting boundaries, right? And saying, this is what I am and this is what I can do. And so hearing her story and then knowing, oh, she's slipping up sometimes as well, but she's also very capable of going back. Mm-hmm. Nobody. So same thing happened. Everybody happily agreed. And some people even said, wow, you did this for 9 months? I would have given up after 3. Why didn't you say something earlier, right?
Yeah.
So there's one thing you have to do is not to blame yourself when this is happening as well. Yeah. Because there is a time when you start realizing things. It's a very slippery process, right? And that's why I'm so keen on people understanding their body and their emotions, because they inform us a bit earlier than our head that something is off, right? When we suddenly feel more tired is a great indicator that something is off. When we get more irritated with our kids, when we get different kind of questions. I actually think I have my next 2 blog posts in January exactly about this.
Great.
Or the ones that just came out yesterday. So when we talk about when things in our habitual life change and people suddenly start making comments, or even we get more tired or so, that is when we need to pay attention.
Yeah.
And then there's a time where it hits us.
Yeah, I love this conversation. It's so juicy. We could talk for hours, but our time is up for today. Yeah. Nick, do you have any information that you would like to offer to my listeners?
Yeah, whoever wants to know more or do the webinar with me is absolutely invited to join me on January 16th. All the information are on my webpage, or I can send them to you so that they can find it straight away. And I love to talk way more about this, as you can see.
And I'll make sure to link Nick's website on my website. Thank you so much. I enjoyed this conversation immensely. Don't forget, you can listen to this and more at greentreeayurveda.com/access if you haven't signed up already. And if you know anyone who is a holistic leader in their community, or you are a holistic leader, I would love to have a conversation with you. You can reach me at hello@greentreeayurveda.com. And I'm really interested in what you have to say about the wisdom of saying no. If you have a comment, I would love to hear it. I hope to talk to you next time. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.